Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining this panel of Medtech Strategics at RESI. What we will do for this hour is that if you have any questions, you can write them in the Q&A or the chat, and then at the end of the hour, we will open it up to questions. And if you want to ask questions at that point in time, just raise your hand and I will give you permission to address the panel directly, and you can speak at that point. With that, I will let Dave take it away.
Hi, my name's Dave Uffer. I'm the Senior Partner and Vice President of Medtech at Alera Health. I'm pleased to have four of our industry executives representing different large companies in our Medtech industry in the area of venture investing from strategics. Through this next hour, we're going to have a dialogue with each of these individuals on how strategics and specifically their companies look to invest, what types of companies they're investing in, and quite a host of issues. We'll take this through a quick introduction of each of the individuals, their background. I'll invite them to talk a little bit about their companies' platforms in MedTech, where they seek opportunities to invest. Then we'll talk about considerations that strategics and their companies look for in investing. I'll start first, and then I'll introduce each of the four panelists that we'll have, and they can give a quick bio. I've been in MedTech myself for 30 years. Most of my history has been with large cap MedTech companies in strategy and business development roles, starting with Abbott Laboratories, Boston Scientific. I've been with Integral Life Sciences, Hologic, and Women's Health, and my most recent role was in Covidien, and then through the acquisition by Medtronic. I now am leading the MedTech practice at Alera Health. We're a global service provider with practices in regulatory and clinical affairs, strategy consulting, and investment banking. As an investment banker, we also represent companies in capital formation, as well as bringing them in strategy, partnering, and M&A processes. So I integrate with probably 20 to 25 different strategics in looking to place capital in strategic assets. So I'm happy to host any questions about some others that are not represented here in the panel. But we have a tremendous panel and love to hear their experiences. We have Rachel Ray from Medtronic, Tomoko Ishikura from Nipro, Takumi Uehara, from Terumo, and Christina Salas from Intuitive Surgical. So I'll go in reverse order. Christine, you want to start with an introduction?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Salas, and I'm a Director of Business Development at Intuitive Surgical. My primary focus is really on evaluating and executing various transactions that range from acquisitions, structured acquisitions, licensing and co-development collaborations, and strategic equity investments. So my background is actually in mechanical and biomedical engineering, and I also have an MBA. I've worked in the medtech industry for just about 17 years now in various technical and management roles. For those of you that don't know about Intuitive, we're the pioneer of robotic-assisted minimally invasive surgery. So we have about just over 5,500 Da Vinci systems that are installed globally, and those are for performing surgery across multiple specialties, with most of those procedures being done in general surgery, urology, and gynecology. Just to give you a sense of scale, in 2019 alone, 1.2 million Da Vinci procedures were performed. And so in addition to our really traditional Da Vinci multi-port robot, we also have a single port robot, the SP system, which is for performing even less invasive procedures. And then our newest platform is our flexible robot, the Ion system, and that's for natural orifice approaches. And we're starting with a peripheral lung biopsy there. And then, of course, to support all of our robotic platforms and procedures, we have a really robust ecosystem of products and services, like smart instruments, training and surgical simulation, and then various tools that leverage different technologies like mixed reality, analytics, cloud computing, AI and machine learning, and then of course, service and support. So thanks again to the RESI team for having me back on the panel, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Christina. Takumi, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, my name is Takumi Uehara. I am a business development representative from a company called Terumo Corporation. So Terumo is actually celebrating 100-year anniversary this year. So we're really excited about it and also grateful for all the support in the healthcare community. Myself, I've been with Terumo for a little bit over 10 years already. And my experience is quite broad, ranging from operations at one of the manufacturing factory to a corporate strategic planning. And also I was a project manager at one of the business units in Belgium. So who is Terumo? Terumo is a medical device manufacturer from Japan, but we operate globally today. And we have three what we call virtual companies. First one is the cardiac and vascular company, which is about the 40% of our annual revenue. And it's the fastest growing one where we focus mainly on endovascular solutions. We also have what we call general hospital company, which is our legacy business. And 90% of its revenue comes from Japan. We do everything from the everyday medical devices like IV lines and infusion pumps to diabetes management and peritoneal dialysis solutions. And we also provide drug delivery service and CDMO services to our pharmaceutical customers. And the last pillar is what we call blood and cell technology company, which is based out of the Denver, Colorado, where we provide blood processing technologies for blood centers, hospitals, and cell therapy companies. So that's it from my introduction. And thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to learning from the other panelists and also the questions as well. Cheers.
Thank you, Takumi. Appreciate that. Next, we have Tomoko from Nipro Corporation.
My name is Tomoko Ishikura. I'm a business development advisor for Nipro Corporation. We are headquartered in Osaka, Japan, and we have three main businesses: medical device, pharma, and pharma packaging. And we recently added cell therapy. And in terms of medical device, dialysis is our biggest business. And we also have sales and R&D in cardio and neurovascular, diagnostics, artificial organs, orthopedics, and in some other areas. We are actively seeking partnership opportunities with the startup companies who bring great value to the patient and the healthcare providers. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tomoko. And finally, we have Rachel Ray with Medtronic.
Sure. Hi, nice to be here. I am a director of business development and licensing within our Surgical Innovations operating unit, which is part of the medical surgical portfolio. So you may have heard our CEO in the news lately. We recently underwent a little bit of structure change, and we have about 4 portfolios now. So similar to the group layout, but a little bit different. And then we have 20 operating units, of which Surgical Innovations is one. So from a business development and licensing perspective, I support everything from equity investments to licensing, distribution, acquisitions, and divestitures. So that's really my role. I'm based out of Boulder, Colorado, and have been in mergers and acquisitions and with Medtronic Covidien for about 10 years now. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rachel. Actually, that's a great segue. I'm going to switch up the order of questions I was going to start with. And that oftentimes companies that we advise, or they're looking to reach out to strategics, and while they're pursuing institutional investors, they know which partner to reach at the institutional investors. They ask which is the best entry point for them into strategic investors. Do they go through corporate development? Should it go to the business development in the business units? As the companies are so diverse now, is there a venture team, or do they even know if there's a venture team at the strategics? And is that their entry point, or are those folks the ones who structure the venture investment? Or is their best introduction into the companies perhaps even at the GM or head of marketing level? So Rachel, why don't we start with you and just give a little bit of the audience an identification of process and where their kind of best first step to introduce their company and technology would be.
Sure. So we meet with various stage companies. Ideally, it'd be nice to see a little bit of data, even animal data, and we can even help coordinate labs to generate some of that data. So we've done that in the past. It really depends on the company. For Medtronic, You can reach out to general managers or contacts that you have at the company. We do have a venture investing arm, and the business units or the operating units, as they're called now, can partner with our venture arm to work through those equity investments. We can also invest on our own as a standalone operating unit. So it really depends. You can reach out to business development folks, such as myself, and I'm happy to connect you if it's not related to surgery specifically. I'm happy to connect you with any of my counterparts in the various operating units, or even our ventures team who operates on their own as well and can invest on their own.
So any way you can get into Medtronic, find a pathway, and they'll get you in the right place.
That's my recommendation. If you have
Okay.
a contact there who's willing to connect you with the appropriate person, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, and Christina?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Medtronic. So I think there's multiple avenues that we work with early stage companies. Some of you may have heard that Intuitive recently launched a corporate venture fund in October of 2020. And so what this is it's a $100 million fund. It's aimed at investing in early stage company that really share our commitment to advancing positive outcomes in healthcare. These investments are going to be financially motivated with no strategic strings attached. And we're looking to invest in opportunities across digital devices, diagnostics, and therapeutics that really accelerate the future of minimally invasive care. The other avenue we have for working with early stage startups is through the strategic side, the business development team, and that's my team. But we also work very closely with our ventures team. So on the business development side, we engage in strategic collaborations and strategic investments, with the difference being that we would actually seek some rights alongside our investment. And so, yeah, so you can get in touch. We try to be very accessible. So that's why we come to conferences like this. So please find us on LinkedIn, our venture webpage via the intuitive.com website. You can actually submit an inquiry via that. If our director of ventures sees that this is more of a strategic opportunity, he's going to send it to me, and vice versa. So we work very closely. And if you have contacts within Intuitive, whether they're on the commercial side, the marketing side, or even on the engineering side, it's always best if you can leverage those contacts to get in touch with us.
Great. Tomoko, I would assume NIPRO is a little bit less complex. How about accessing the right folks in the right functions at NIPRO?
So, Nippon Corporation, we have business development team back in Japan who evaluate all the deals which come in, and I am located in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then I work with them, and then every deal will be assessed with our CTO as well. So no matter where this opportunity is coming from, we will basically, they will basically end up in the same bucket, and then we will evaluate together. So I would say that the best contact is find me on LinkedIn and then reach out. And if you have any contact with NIPRO people, you could reach out to them as well. But they will basically be coming to the same people eventually.
Okay, and then finally to Kumi, I saved this for last because I'm even still confused at exactly how to access into Terumo in particular business units or functions. Could you explain to the audience how they're best to approach Terumo for minority equity investments?
Yeah, first of all, apologies for the confusion. But our doors are open actually 360 degrees. So you can reach out to us through the business unit avenue, as well as you can reach out to us from the corporate avenue, which is myself. Unlike Medtronic, we don't have our own standalone venture funding unit, but at the corporate level, we have a team of a corporate development, which is myself and a few of my colleagues. So we always talk to each other between the corporate level and the business unit level. So from any directions, it's fine to reach out to us.
So, Takumi, could you tell me about what type of capital that you do typically deploy in minority equity investments? Is this very selective? Is it fairly active? Maybe one or two a year, or it's a pretty active part of Terumo to help invest into the medtech marketplace?
Yeah, so we're relatively new when it comes to early stage investment. So we're still learning as we do. Having said that, the number of deals that we typically do is one or two a year. So it's really selective in terms of this investment process. The investment amount is between $1 to $10 million per round, and we invest between $50 to $30 million throughout the investment horizon.
So that's pretty significant amount.
Yeah.
Tomoko, the thesis that Nipro has?
I would say it's similar. We just in dialysis area, we are quite active in both investment and acquisition. Then we acquired several companies last year all over the world geographically. But in terms of investment outside dialysis area, I would say it's one or two, and then amount is similar, 3 to 10 million.
Great. Rachel, a little bit about the types of investments and capital deployed.
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, great. The feed's going in and out a little bit. I think it's up to 5 million, but there are instances where we've invested more or less. It really depends on the opportunity and what the company is looking for as well. So it really depends. Number of investments a year, I'd have to check back with our ventures team who really manages that. But we're very active in both the investment and the M&A space as a whole.
Is there any particular amount that you will typically deploy, lead or follow with other investors?
Let's see. So we typically don't lead around. It's pretty rare for us to lead around, but I would say up to $5 million is pretty standard for us in terms of investments. But again, it really depends. We've had instances where we go above 5 million. We've had instances when we only invest $1 million. So it really depends.
Great. And then Christina, just finally, like your comments for Intuitive's investment.
Yep. So obviously the venture fund is very new, but I can speak a little bit to that side. So he's aiming at, check size is around 500,000 to 5 million, depending on the opportunity. And probably, Series A, B is going to be the sweet spot, but he's really open to looking beyond those, but probably A, B is right where he's looking. And then, number of deals, it was just started in October. On the strategic side, the business development side, that is highly variable. We are actually really active in doing quite a bit of co-development type of collaborations, licensing collaborations, and oftentimes in parallel with that, strategic investments. And the amount invested there is just highly variable depending on the technology and the opportunity.
All right, good. Well, I'm going to change up gears just a little bit. Instead of going up and down the line, I'm going to ask a general question for one or two folks. If it's all the same for you in each of the respective companies, we can pass on to the next one. And please, if you have any different opinion, let's shake it up a little bit, or a different way within your company, please chime in. One of the questions that I often get or have been faced with is, if you're looking for a strategic investment, is it one and only, or would strategics actually co-invest alongside others? Rachel, can you talk about what your experience has been or your preferences to say, look, if Medtronic's going to invest, we're going to be the only strategic in there, or you're open to have others along?
We've had instances where we've invested alongside another strategic. Ideally, we'd like to be the only strategic in a round, but there have been instances if the technology is compelling enough or the therapy is compelling enough, we would invest alongside another strategic.
Okay, Tomoko, any comments from yourself or anyone else on that, or is it pretty much the same?
It's pretty much the same. And also when Nipro makes an investment, we usually seek some kind of a potential strategic alliance as well. So if other strategic companies already taking some rights, we won't participate in that round.
Well, that's a great setup. Almost feel like it was a planned setup, but it wasn't. To the next question, always asked about rights, and look, the companies here and our participants are looking to get funded. It's always fantastic to have a strategic investor, but they ask me all the time, and they're always wondering, do we expect to have the strategics ask for hard rights? What should we be looking to give in rights? I think we'd like to hear from each of the folks here on what your typical expectation is for rights, if they're a demand, if they're required, if you're hoping for that, or you're very open along those lines. Christina?
Yep. So, obviously on the venture side, that's more of a financially motivated fund. And there would be that's a traditional kind of VC engagement. No strategic rights would be requested on that side. On the strategic side, we do seek some rights. And so I think this is a decision that early stage companies shouldn't take lightly, obviously. They should certainly think through that decision and around the timing of selling rights in their technology. But if done properly, I really think this is a great way for them to raise capital, both non-dilutive and dilutive, to fund their commercialization activities. And I think a great example of a potential win-win is when an early stage company has a commercial focus and expertise that's actually different than the field of interest of the strategic. However, the core technology that's being developed has applications in this field of interest for the strategic. And so what this allows is for the early stage company to sell rights in a field that's not of primary interest or their expertise, while still retaining the rights to their core field that they're pursuing. And all this while bringing in capital to fund really critical development and commercialization activities.
So Christina, are startups and innovators here, are you saying that they can access two different mechanisms through Intuitive for investment, either strictly through ventures or actually at the business level, they can expect to be able to have investment potential from the business directly outside of a venture investment? I mean, it's still a venture investment, or is this a partnership with some capital deployed?
No, so it's correct. There's two totally different avenues to work with Intuitive. More of a VC, financial investment, and then on the strategic side, there's also multiple avenues within the strategic side. We can do a strategic equity investment. We could do some type of collaboration where there's milestone payments for development activities that are completed. So really on the strategic side, there's both the option of dilutive and non-dilutive funding. And then on the venture side, there's of course just the equity investment option.
Understood. This brings us to Takumi, where you do not have, Takumi, Terumo currently established a standalone venture arm. You talk a little bit about what your interests in securing either rights, or this will still be purely minority equity investment without any strings?
Yeah, so we are 100% motivated by strategic purposes. So in that sense, the very least we ask for would be the board observer right. So that would be the simplest form of partnership where we invest minority equity investment in return for board observer right. But at the other end of the spectrum, where we feel that we can add value to these sort of companies from the engineering and development perspectives, We then engage ourselves in the co-development agreement. And we had cases where we sent our team of engineers to the startup companies to work on the solution together. And of course, we have different varieties somewhere in between as well, where we only ask for a distribution agreement for one-time payment, or we ask for a distribution agreement for an equity investment as well.
So let's talk about that. When you're looking for some types of commercial rights, is that typically all four of our panelists here are representing global organizations. Will you do that on a regional basis, on a global basis, or different mechanisms, again, for going to each of your regions to understand their strategic interests? I'm sorry, Takumi, that was for you.
Sorry for that. Okay. Yeah, where we have a global footprint, then we ask for global distribution agreement. However, for Terumo, some of the businesses, we're only active in some parts of the regions, especially Japan, in which case we only ask for distribution for the Japan as the territory.
Right, Tomoko, how's the experience with Nipro?
Most common partnership would be the distribution rights for the Japanese market for Nipro as well, but sometimes it could be the US, could be Europe, but we try not to add too tight string to the startup companies because their success is also important and they will have to be able to raise the following rounds. So it could be just a forced negotiation right for a certain period of time, or the distribution rights with some terms which include a change of control.
Excellent. When we look at the stages of the companies, Rachel started to, and Christina were alluding to this a little bit. There's always different attitudes. I want to at least understand who's out there for landscaping purposes. I want to get tight with the company to have that relationship early, even though I'm not going to have likely investment in them, all the way to, look, come to me when you have A, B, and C, and you're ready for us to deploy capital. What stage of companies do you, A, typically want to see and understand who's out there in the marketplace, and then B, what type of information or level of development are you looking for to actually deploy capital into the companies? You want to start with that, Tomoko?
We usually like to see some clinical data. However, our last 3 partnership investment, actually, they didn't have a clinical data. So I think it really depends on the technology. And if it's really unique and then it's something we understand, we accept early stage company. And it's something which is new to Nipro, we probably prefer some later stage company, even companies with some revenue and sales and marketing, so that we could just acquire the whole company and add to our portfolio. So it depends on the area and the technology.
Takumi, is that pretty much the same for you, or are you a little bit earlier since you're deploying a lot more capital over the lifetime of the company?
Yeah, I think we're a little bit more comfortable investing in the earlier opportunities as well. So if the company has a benchtop, one functioning prototype that can be tested on the benchtop model, that's good. And if the company has preclinical results, if they're available, that's even better.
Great. Rachel, I think not only surgical innovations, of course, you're one of 4 pillars and now 20 operating businesses. Why don't you tell us a little bit specifically about within your business, and then Medtronic in general?
Sure. So for us, I would say we would like to see at least preclinical data. I mentioned that earlier. Animal data would be great. And if the technology is compelling enough, we can certainly assist in generating some of that data as well. We've looked at things like that, but it's really challenging for us. We've had many companies reach out that don't even have a prototype yet. And it's really challenging for us to even gauge the functionality of the technology or the therapy. So for us, I would say some data would be helpful. I don't think benchtop is enough, but if it's compelling enough that you think you should reach out to us, please do. And we like to foster those relationships over time anyways, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to even partner on some of that preclinical animal data.
So you want to see them very early, even if you might not deploy capital early, just to understand what's in the marketplace. Again, get this on the landscape and know when potentially you would deploy capital.
I think it's important to certainly reach out to some of the strategics that you think could be a good fit or a good partner. Foster those relationships early, and maybe there's an opportunity for an investment earlier. At least put it on their radar. So if there is a competitive technology out there, they know that your technology or therapy exists as well. And it may be more compelling than other companies that they're speaking to. So I would recommend reaching out earlier rather than later, even if there's not an immediate opportunity for partnership or investment.
Christina, is Intuitive of the same ilk as the other panelists?
Yeah, no, I would echo everything that Rachel just said. And, obviously it is dependent on the product and the technology, but I think Intuitive is a little different because we typically will integrate a lot of these technologies with our robotic platforms. And so therefore we'll often engage earlier in the development cycle before any significant clinical or commercial validation has been completed. But like Rachel said, look, we do need, it's helpful to have some prototypes, some videos, to have your IP filed, before we engage. And Intuitive has a really innovative culture. And I think that's one of the drivers for why we like to engage early. We also have a lot of expertise around the unique requirements for robotic surgery. And I think ultimately that's really going to benefit the early development of a technology and better position it for commercialization. We also have different considerations and when it comes to taking new technology to market. For example, specific clinical and human factors requirements that go into the design. We really focus on holistic design. And so I think that further supports, our desire to get involved earlier with these companies. I think maybe one exception, right, where Intuitive might engage a little later might be if we're looking at a technology that possibly changes a fundamental surgical technique, right? In those instances, we're going to look for, more clinical and market data for, feedback from surgeons to see that they're actually trusting that technology, that the clinical data is showing that it's working.
Great. Well, we're just a little bit over the halfway mark here. We have this going till 1 p.m. And I just wanted to reiterate, I invite anybody through the chat at the bottom of the screen here or through the Q&A, whichever works best for you. You can submit questions that we will be sure to get to throughout the panel. And then we'll reserve time at the end for Karen Dale, who's with Life Science Nation, to open up so anybody can ask live questions and have dialogue back and forth. So please go ahead. We'll make sure that we get anything that's submitted electronically here, and then you'll have time at the end. Let's talk a little bit about why strategic investors. There's, again, many different rationales for the startups. What's in it for them? Why should they be reaching out, aside from just getting dollars? Many of the times when we advise companies, even going to the institutional investors, sometimes we need smart money and sometimes we just need a check, and those who have the most crooked number in front of it is the best investor. And it really depends on the strategy and the build out and development of the company. Let's talk about the benefits and the cachet to have strategic investors. Tomoko, tell me a little bit about what makes a lot of the rationale for having somebody like Nipro come along.
So as I mentioned, we try to add value to the companies, and we provide our clinical expertise. We provide our physician and a patient network. We sometimes help organize the startup to conduct the pilot study or first in human in our facility or the hospitals that we have a great relationship with. So, and if the company is interested in getting into the Japanese market, we have a very deep expertise in how to get the regulatory approval and reimbursement. So that's how we try to collaborate with the companies to help them access to the market, which they may not be so familiar with, and then provide our expertise.
Takumi, you also mentioned that you bring R&D resources and many other resources. Rachel, if this from Medtronicus were to come from the Ventures Group, is the rest of the business unit kept at arm's length and informed through the Ventures Group, or would you bring any type of the resources? Look, there's probably 15, 16 different departments that I think when a startup was building something out, from regulatory and quality, it could be clinical. Somebody needs to understand what health economics is all about, and the full 9 yards. Are there resources that Medtronic will bring to bear for their invested companies?
Yeah, so if there is an investment that's aligned to one of our business units, our venture team could invest on their own in something that may not even be aligned to Medtronic, more that financially driven in investment that Christina was talking about. But they also invest alongside our operating units. So if they're investing alongside our operating units, such as Surgical Innovations that I'm a part of, they depend on the operating unit functions to really provide their perspective and expertise on what makes the technology or the therapy compelling. So we do bring that knowledge, and I think it's important for those early stage companies, whether we're an investor or we're even just diligencing the company, listen to that feedback from the strategics and what they're looking for, because oftentimes it's not just that particular company's feedback, but it'll be echoed across various strategics that you may engage with as well in what they're looking for in either a partner or a target down the road.
Great. Christine, I would expect we have a lot of interesting comments from Intuitive on this as well.
Sure. So on the venture side, we certainly see ourselves as a value add investor, and that we're going to be able to leverage Intuitive's access to our industry experience in surgical robotics and our customer connections. And so I think that's why we're aiming at some of those early stage Series A, B investments, because we really think that providing those connections to our portfolio companies is really going to help them to blaze through the markets that they're pursuing. On the strategic side, I think I made some comments earlier on really kind of the win-win scenarios for some early stage companies there. I mean, if you have interests that are in a different field than a strategic that is investing in you, that's great, because you can raise very valuable capital money, whether it's non-dilutive or dilutive, and you can use that money to fund your commercialization and development activities, to develop this core technology, to go pursue the market that you have expertise in and that you're focusing in. But you can also, sell these rights to the strategic, and they can pursue their interests in the field of their interests. So.
Great. I want to go through deeply on the processing and timing, and I can't tell you how many times I'm working with a client and they say, "Oh, we're going to be all set. We had a call with XYZ company last week. We'll probably close an investment this month, and then be able to work with rounding out the round, completing the round with the other institutionals." And I oftentimes will scratch my head and say, "You don't understand the process here. Let me walk you through in the timing." While each company has a little bit of a timing, I think it's helpful to level set some of the startups that we have here on your individual processes and what you would expect for typical timing to get introduced to the company, especially if this is the first time. Understandably, if you've had the relationship, you've had many discussions, and now you activate to go into due diligence, that's different. But the typical timing, if a company would be appropriate, but you're just meeting them now, what the process and timing would be. Takumi, you want to take us through a little bit of that?
Yeah, so if it's really our first encounter with the company, then typically the time frame would be somewhere between 3 to 6 months for us to evaluate the opportunity, to understand about the technology as well, and then do all the due diligence eventually until the equity investment. We've had cases though that because the technology was not in our direct domain, that we needed more time to evaluate. So we didn't participate in a certain round, but eventually we participated in a subsequent round as well.
Great. And then while we're on the topic, if you had known a company for a while, it was pretty much right within your sweet spot, and now they're going, maybe they're at a next round of investment, and they're approaching you again to say we're on our Series B. What would be the timing and then the diligence process?
I think if that's the case, then we could make the deal done as quickly as between 2 to 3 months. Because what happens is that even if the due diligence is clear, we still have to develop a business case and make a proposal internally to get the alignment and also buy-ins from the management side.
Okay. Tomoko, I've watched these go fairly rapidly, and other times very drawn out process with Nipro. What's your take here?
Depends on how familiar we are in the field, probably. And I would say it usually takes 1 to 2 months for technical due diligence. And we would like to see the sample. We would like to see some data. And once we pass the technical due diligence, it usually takes 1 to 2 months to actually develop all the documents until we get them signed. So 3 to 6 months would be our typical time frame. Although, as you said, Dave, we've moved faster. We've also moved a little slower.
Great. Christina or Rachel, anything else to add, or pretty much the same here for you, the both of you?
You know, I think on the venture side, it's the timing will typically follow the process that the company is running for raising money. On the strategic side, though, I would say it's highly variable as far as timing, and it really just depends on the product or technology. I mean, for example, if we're looking at a technology that actually doesn't currently fit into our product pipeline, but we really see a value add, we really see that this technology could improve patient outcomes or other aspects of the quadruple aim, then we're really gonna take a deep dive and diligence and really try to understand how this technology could benefit our robotic procedures. And that process could take a while because we're going to be building a business case on our side, versus a scenario where it's a really easy slot into our product pipeline. This technology is a gap we had. We've been looking around, and you know that could be a very quick process, like 3 to 6 months, if we don't have to build and justify that business case internally.
Great, helpful. Rachel, if you have anything to add there, please go ahead. If not, we can move on.
Sure. Similar, I would say Medtronic is becoming more nimble, and that was part of the reason for some of the restructuring that we've undergone recently and are starting to implement. We have gone as quickly, similar to Christina, following targets processes, companies processes, we've gone as quickly as 2 to 3 months. It really depends on how buttoned up the target is, how much data they have available. If we have to start doing some testing, even animal labs, it has gotten a little bit more complicated, of course, with the COVID environment, but we've gotten more creative with Zoom labs and such. So it could go towards the 3 to 6 month process as well. But it is possible to go 2 to 3 months as well within Medtronic. It really, similar to what the rest of the panelists have been saying, it really depends on the target, how much information they have available, and what their process looks like.
Thank you. Gonna talk a little bit about some of the other strategics that I've seen out there, and then get right back to our panelists again. When I think of somebody like JJDC, Johnson & Johnson, originally they were very altruistic and not very much tied to a particular business, in that they were seeding the marketplace with very good funding before most medtech companies even had venture funds, and we're participating extremely well, deploying capital across the healthcare industry to foster very good technologies and continue along. We've seen many companies now establish their own venture funds. GE was a little bit more financially motivated in their expectations for returns, and others are purely strategically aligned. And I would expect most of the panelists here are highly motivated for strategic interest. In fact, likely to have some type of business unit that might be required to be a sponsor, or at least to have some inputs there. So I want to go into some of the motivations, and then what the end of the road looked like for the investment, whether that's some type of rights, even if they're not being asked up front. Does this have a much more likelihood of an acquisition? And then could it go earlier? And I'll give an example. Christos Monovalkis from Olympus, who was not able to join us today, they do deploy capital at Olympus, and from the business development side, they do like to have partnerships, whether it's distribution or some sorts of rights or collaborations before they go into M&A, and it's worked exceptionally well for them. Rachel, tell me about the investment and then what that would lead to down the road.
Sure. We've looked at investment and then acquisition down the road. Sometimes there's right, sometimes there's not. It really depends. And it depends on whether it's the operating unit involved, and sometimes it doesn't depend on that at all. So I would say that if the technology is not, if it's a brand new market or it's not immediately aligned with Medtronic, then it could go the distribution route. It would allow us to really understand the market more and test the market with the new therapy or device. But if we are in the market, we feel very comfortable with the market, we feel very comfortable with the therapy, then it could go towards just acquisition as a whole. Again, and it may have rights, it may not have rights. It may just be that we're an equity investor in the company, and we continue to have a relationship with the company and understand when they're either running out of money or they're looking to run a process.
I might be a little bit too deep, but this actually predates even my time at Covidien, where they had made investments in areas that they had potential interest in, but we're starting to learn about that. And now, very specifically, I knew that they had investments, say, in women's health, which you had run for years from a biz dev standpoint, but had no place specifically in women's health outside of the typical surgical platforms that they had, and now do have very direct interests and assets that you've acquired in women's health. But that was sort of a placeholder, if you will, or learning experience. Understanding if you wanted to or could get into the market, however you would want to categorize that. Do you also invest in those areas you're not looking to acquire, but you're looking to learn a little bit more, or have some type of participation where it's, I guess you could say, maybe a placeholder?
From the venture side, they do some of their own equity investments as well. So they could be learning about different markets. Within the operating unit, it has to have a little bit of strategic alignment. So for instance, in the GYN or women's health space that you mentioned, Dave, we participate quite a bit in that market through our surgical business today, through hysterectomy, myomectomy, and such. We made some strategic investments in that space to learn more about markets that were more nascent and growing. But it was still strategically aligned to where we were going, and ultimately helped us lead to some acquisitions as well. So if it's more operating unit aligned, I would say that there needs to be a little bit of strategic alignment in where we expect the operating unit to go in the future. On the venture side, it may not be that way.
Thanks, Christina. I'd say you represent one of the companies with the least diversification in the different areas that you represent, but the most diversification when we talk about minimally invasive robotic assisted minimally invasive surgery. There are just a massive amount of technologies and adjuncts that facilitate and enable more minimally invasive surgery. So kind of walk us through where the areas of interest again would lie in? Are these investments through the ventures group that would expect to turn into an acquisition or some type of integration within your core platforms or expansion areas?
Sure. So on the venture side, I think number one, it is a financially motivated investment, but we're not going to go out and invest in an automotive company. So yes, there is number two, some strategic alignment. At Intuitive, we believe that minimally invasive care is life-enhancing care, and so that is the theme. And we are certainly looking to invest in technologies that build that ecosystem and drive towards more minimally invasive care. And so we're looking at digital opportunities, devices, diagnostics, and therapeutics that really accelerate that future of minimally invasive care. I'll say on the venture side, there's no necessarily expectation of a future acquisition. We're not ruling that out. It certainly could lead to that. But when we look at really kind of the strategic aspects of a venture investments, these are usually in the longer term horizon, right, than on the business development strategic side. So, maybe we could see a fit in bringing this company in the longer term or integrating the technology, but that's really, maybe on the 5 to 10 year horizon. Whereas on the strategic business development side, if we're doing investments, it's because we see a near-term strategic fit within our current product portfolio in the near term of 2 to 5 years. And whether that could ultimately end up in an acquisition if we're looking at a structured acquisition opportunity, or it couldn't if we've done a co-development and licensing deal and secured the rights that we need. So it is highly variable.
Okay. We're getting close to the end of this. I will mention, I do have one question from the audience, and I think we'll open that up to any question. Karen, if you want to bring in any written questions, feel free to read those off, or then we can open the line. However you want to have anyone raise their hand, and we can let them ask directly of any of our panelists a question. This comes to me all the time, and this was when I was an investor within the strategics as well as an advisor now. And it's changed 12 years ago, 10 years ago when I was investing, and even the institutional investors, when they saw a right of first refusal or a right of first negotiation, they would run for the hills. They got really upset that it was going to potentially limit the pool of who they could go to. And I just see Alexei asked this question about ROFRs and right of first negotiations, and I just got another one that popped up. Look, at times when I was in partnership with companies, I didn't, or looking to acquire, as long as there was a good out clause for a distribution or that I could buy that out, it just goes into the deal and what the cost to buy out those agreements are. Right of first negotiation, when somebody could jump in front of me or they had the right to create the first deal, that was a little bit different. And again, it wasn't my greatest fear or issue to deal with. But I want to hear from each of you because I get this question every day when somebody is looking to structure their terms with the strategic. Takumi, you want to talk about right of first negotiation or right of first refusal?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation whenever we encounter, strategic investors already having such rights. If the technology is exactly in the middle of a domain, and if you really want to acquire the technology down the road, then we may not really care too much about the rights and then just make an investment and see what happens. However, when the technology is slightly outside of our comfortable domain, and if a strategic already has a right of first refusal, then we don't really see a reason to invest because we're not really familiar with that particular domain. And if in case that strategic decides not to acquire the company, then we may wonder ourselves, why so, right? So yeah, that's the situation.
Rachel, have you seen this an issue at all? And I guess it might not, I'd also ask if you see look, each of you have said that you are not leading the round and you're likely syndicating. with other institutional investors, even if it's not an issue for you, do you see that in difficulty syndicating and the institutional investors are a little bit skittish or upset about that?
I have seen it a couple times where we have not invested alongside because another strategic has invested and has a ROFR on the company. But it was actually more so because the company itself expressed strong interest in being in that partnership with the strategic who already had the ROFR. So I would say it really depends on the relationship with the company, the relationship with the strategic. But if it is similar to what Takumi just said, if it aligns squarely within our strategy, we wouldn't be skittish about it. It really depends on our relationship with the company and the openness of the company to have another strategic full well knowing that they have a ROFR in hand with a partner they already have.
Okay. Christina or Tomoko, anything to add there? No.
Nipro is a bit more conservative, and then we probably won't invest if they've given away those rights to other strategic.
Okay. You know, again, from my purposes, when I invested, it was really to assure that the company was going to continue to get invested at each next step. I had been in investments where there were 5 strategics in, and very strangely enough, I think a lot of head scratcher, there was a company that acquired it and it was none of the 5 strategics that had invested in that. So it doesn't always assure your path to exit with the invested companies. And when you invest, it doesn't always assure you're going to be the acquirer. I think it gets you much earlier, much smarter with the company, and you can build your thesis for potential acquisition and make the right valuation. And I think there's a lot that the strategics bring to it. I've not held out other companies in some instances where I was given the right to exclude anybody else, and I said I want another strategic investor in, where I think it made it a stronger company and it made it a stronger syndicate again, and it brought in investors. And if I wanted to acquire it, I felt that I would get out in front of that company that was investing as well. And at times I don't. So to the audience, I think it really depends on how the company is processing the discussion and how they're going about the investment. Karen, if you have any questions that you want to offer that's come through, or open it up to anyone else, we have a few more minutes.
Yeah, there was one question that came in on the Q&A that said, are you looking at a startup in South America? Is there success cases that you can share? So what is your opinion on the potential of like these regions to generate high value solutions? So maybe looking to regions that are outside the typical, you know, Europe, the US, and looking at regions that are, you know, less rich in venture, but may give good technologies.
I'll answer that. At least, you know, 4 years ago in my experience at Medtronic, we had business development in each of the regions, and if they wanted to bring through a venture investment that was specific to their region and value, they could sponsor and get behind that and bring it through. There were many mechanisms to invest. And the other question I'd say, if you're looking, does it make a difference geographically where the company is, if it's going to have global implications? I don't think that makes any difference. We would have invested anywhere globally, especially if there was opportunity to bring that technology on a global basis. Would any of the other participants have more comments about that? Christina, I saw you kind of nodding and shaking your head, same thing.
Yeah, I think for Intuitive, we're really focused on the technology itself. And so, you know, whether it's in South America or domestic, you know, it's all about the technology and the potential that the technology has to improve patient outcomes, improve the care team experience, and reduce the overall cost to treat.
Yeah, I'd say whether it's investing or partnering or acquiring, there are sometimes it's for local markets, and we heard that from Tomoko and Takumi, that they have a very strong setup in their home markets in Japan, and there might be different interests for them in that region, or they might have expansion plans into South America, and they would take process and companies through process that are of interest there. So I think that brings us to the top of the hour. I really want to thank each of our 4 panelists for your gracious time and amazing insights. And thank you to Life Science Nation for putting this on. We all look to keep a healthy medtech environment. Happy New Year. Stay safe out there. And thanks for all the participants.
Thank you all very much, and thank you very much to the panelists. And one quick note to the attendees: if you have more questions, I'm sure all of the panelists would be more than happy to answer them. If you reach out through the partnering platform, they'll get a notification, and then you can continue the discussion if you have more specific questions. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.